The sun was beaten down hard on the busy movie set, creating a hot, sticky atmosphere that made everyone irritable. It was one of those days where the air felt heavy and the noise seemed to echo off every building. Crew members were rushing back and forth, shouting instructions to one another, carrying heavy cables, lights, and cameras. There was a sense of organized chaos, which is normal for filming, but today there was an added layer of tension. It wasn't just the pressure to get the shot right before the sun went down. It was the silent, intimidating presence of a special guest who had arrived for security purposes, standing near the edge of the set. Away from the actors but close enough to see everything was a police K-9 unit. This wasn't a pet, and it certainly wasn't a dog you would want to approach without permission. It was a large, muscular Belgian Malinois, a breed known for its incredible drive, intelligence, and serious nature. The dog was wearing a tactical vest that looked heavy and professional, with patches that identified it as a working police K-9. Just looking at the animal made you take a step back. It stood still as a statue, its head held high, ears perked up, and eyes scanning the crowd with a focus that was almost unnerving. You could feel the change in the air when people walked past this dog. Usually on a movie set, people are relaxed, joking around and eating snacks between takes. But when they walked near the K-9 unit, the laughter stopped. The crew members would lower their voices and quicken their pace. It was a silent respect, but mostly it was fear. Everyone knew that this dog was a weapon. It was trained to bite, to track, and to protect. To the people passing by, the dog represented a dangerous force that was waiting to be unleashed. There was no tail wagging, no happy panting, just pure, concentrated power. The handler, a tall and serious-looking police officer, stood next to the dog. He held the leash with a firm grip, but he didn't need to pull it. The dog knew exactly where to be. It didn't tug or wander. It simply existed in a state of high alert. The dog's mouth was closed, its jaw set tight, and occasionally a low, deep rumble would come from its throat if someone got too close. It wasn't a bark, but more of a warning sound that sent shivers down the spines of the nearby. Makeup artists and cameramen. People watching from a distance couldn't help but stare. There is something fascinating about a creature that looks so wild yet is completely under control. One of the lighting technicians, a guy who usually jokes about everything, whispered to his friend, "I wouldn't want to be the bad guy that dog is chasing." His friend nodded in agreement, keeping his eyes on the animal. The dog seemed to sense the fear, or maybe it was just doing its job, but it turned its head slowly toward them, locking eyes with them for just a second before turning back to watch the main road. That 1 second was enough to make the technicians look away and busy themselves with their work. The reason for such high security was the presence of a major movie star. The cast and crew were waiting for Keanu Reeves. Everyone knew he was a kind person, the kind of actor who treats everyone with respect. But with fame comes a need for serious safety measures. Crowds had been gathering outside the perimeter, hoping to catch a glimpse of him, and the police department had brought in the best K-9 teams to ensure nothing went wrong. This particular dog was famous in its own right among the local officers for having one of the best tracking records in the unit. It had caught criminals and found missing people. And it had a reputation for being absolutely fearless. As the minutes ticked by, the noise level on the set rose again, but the bubble around the dog remained quiet. It was like a force field. A young woman carrying a tray of water bottles had to walk near the unit to get to the actors. She looked nervous. Her hands were shaking slightly as she gripped the tray. She tried to walk casually, but her body language screamed that she was terrified. She kept her eyes strictly on the ground, not wanting to make eye contact with the beast. As she passed, the dog shifted its weight. The movement was fluid and fast. The sound of its paws scraping against the pavement made the woman freeze. She stopped dead in her tracks, barely breathing, waiting for the dog to lunge or bark. The handler gave a small, almost invisible signal with his hand. The dog relaxed slightly but didn't take its eyes off the woman until she was safely past. When she finally reached the other side, she let out a huge breath of air and laughed nervously with a colleague. It was a stark reminder that this was a working animal, a predator trained for police work. It wasn't there to make friends or be petted. It was there to work, and that made it dangerous in the eyes of the public, even the other security guards. Big guys who spend their days dealing with difficult people gave the K9 plenty of space. They knew better than anyone that a human attacker is predictable, but a dog is lightning fast and can inflict serious damage in seconds. The dog's very presence changed the mood of the set from a creative, artistic environment to something much more serious and gritty. It was a reminder of the real world outside the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. The heat of the afternoon continued to rise. The dog panted slightly, its tongue hanging out just a little bit to cool down, but its eyes never stopped moving. It watched the directors, it watched the extras, and it watched the shadows. It looked for threats that didn't exist. To the dog, everything was a potential target until proven otherwise. This intensity is what made people so afraid. There was no softness in its posture. It was all angles and tension. A coil of muscle ready to snap, rumors started to ripple through the crew that the main star was just a few minutes away. The director called for everyone to get into their positions. The energy shifted from waiting to working. But amidst all this movement and noise, the K9 unit remained a statue of fear. People hurried past it, glancing sideways, making sure not to stumble and fall into its territory. It was strange to see how one animal could control the flow of human traffic without saying a word. The fear was primal. Deep down, humans know that canines are predators, and seeing one this large and this disciplined triggered a basic instinct to stay away. The handler checked his watch and looked down at his partner. He spoke a quiet word to the dog, perhaps a command or just a bit of reassurance. The dog's ear twitched. For a brief moment, the hard mask slipped, and the dog looked up at the officer with loyalty. But to everyone else watching from 10 feet away, that moment of softness was invisible. They only saw the teeth, the vest, and the intense stare. They saw a creature that could take a man down in seconds. The tension on the set was at its peak now. The call went out that the convoy was approaching. Engines roared in the distance. The K9 officer straightened his back, and the dog sensed the change. It stood up even taller, its muscles rippling under its short fur. It was ready for anything. The crowd of extras hushed, the crew froze, and all eyes turned to the road where the cars would appear. The fear of the dog was momentarily replaced by the excitement of the star's arrival. But the dog stood there as a silent guardian, a reminder that safety comes at a cost, and sometimes the cost involves a creature that is truly terrifying to behold. It was in this exact moment, right before the cars pulled up, that the dynamic was about to shift in a way no one expected. The feared dog and the beloved actor were on a collision course that would leave everyone breathless. The sound of approaching engines broke the tension on the set, signaling that the wait was finally over. A line of sleek black SUVs turned the corner and slowly rolled to a halt near the main entrance. The dust from the gravel road swirled around the tires before settling again. Immediately, the energy shifted. The crew members who had been nervously glancing at the police dog now straightened their backs and checked their equipment one last time. The big moment had arrived. The doors of the vehicles opened and a few people stepped out assistants. Security staff, and then, finally, the man everyone was waiting for, Keanu Reeves, stepped out of the car, looking completely different from what you might expect a superstar to look like. There was no flashy designer suit, no oversized sunglasses hiding his face, and no loud shouting to clear the way. He was dressed simply in a comfortable jacket, a pair of jeans, and boots that looked like they had seen a lot of walking. He had his classic hairstyle, slightly messy but fitting him perfectly. He didn't walk with the arrogant strut that some famous actors use to show they own the place. Instead, he moved with a quiet, steady pace. Looking around at the set with genuine interest, one of the first things he did was reach back into the car to grab his own bottle of water. He didn't wait for an assistant to hand it to him. He twisted the cap, took a sip, and offered a polite nod to the driver who was holding the door open. It was such a small gesture, but the crew members watching noticed it immediately. It showed that, despite his massive fame, he didn't see himself as being above anyone else. He was just a guy coming to do a job. As he began walking toward the filming area, people started to recognize him. A few whispers rippled through the crowd, followed by excited smiles. Keanu smiled back. He didn't ignore the people working hard around him. He stopped briefly to shake hands with an older gentleman who was adjusting a lighting rig. He patted a young production assistant on the shoulder and asked if they were staying hydrated in the heat. It was this human quality that made everyone love him, not just his movies. He made people feel seen. The director, a stressed-looking man with a headset, walked up to greet him. They exchanged a warm greeting and started talking about the scene they were about to shoot. Keanu listened intently, nodding his head, asking questions about the camera angles. He was fully focused on the work. But as they began to walk together toward the main set, something else caught Keanu's attention. He was walking past the area where the police canine unit was stationed. The atmosphere around the dog was still tense. The crew members were giving the animal a wide berth, and the handler was standing stiffly, keeping a close eye on the crowd. Most people, even other actors, would have simply hurried past this spot. The sight of the intense, muscular dog with the police written on its vest was enough to make anyone keep their eyes forward and keep moving. But Keanu Reeves is not most people. As he got closer to the unit, his steps slowed down. He stopped mid-sentence while talking to the director. The director kept walking for a second before realizing Keanu wasn't beside him anymore. He turned back, confused, wondering what had caught the actor's eye. Keanu wasn't looking at the cameras, the lights, or the script in his hand. He was looking directly at the dog. To everyone else, the dog looked scary and unapproachable. But Keanu saw something different. Maybe it was his love for animals, or maybe it was just his natural empathy, but he didn't see a weapon. He saw a living being that was standing in the middle of a loud, chaotic, and hot environment. He noticed that the dog was panting heavily, despite the serious look on its face. He noticed how the dog's ears were swiveling back and forth, trying to process all the strange noises of the movie set. He saw the tension in the dog's muscles and realized that the animal was working hard to stay focused. The handler, noticing the famous actor staring at his dog, stood up a little straighter. He held the leash a bit tighter, just in case. This was a common reaction. People were usually afraid of the dog, or they wanted to take a picture from a safe distance. The handler prepared himself to tell Keanu to stay back, as he had to do with many curious bystanders. But Keanu didn't stop at a safe distance. He took a step closer to the dog. It was a bold move that made a few of the nearby crew members gasp quietly. They knew how sharp those teeth were. But there was no fear in Keanu's body language. His shoulders were relaxed, and his movements were slow and deliberate. He wasn't challenging the dog. He was just acknowledging it. The dog seemed to sense this change in energy immediately. It stopped its low growling and turned its head fully toward Keanu, its dark eyes locked onto the actor. There was a moment of stillness where time seemed to freeze. The handler watched, fascinated. Usually the dog would be on high alert when a stranger approached so closely. But instead of bristling or barking, the dog just watched him. It was as if the dog understood that this person was not a threat. Keanu tilted his head slightly to the side, a soft smile appearing on his face. He didn't say anything to the handler. His entire focus was on the animal. He could see that underneath the tough vest and the stern training, this was just a good dog who was doing its job. He knew how exhausting it could be to be on all the time, to have to be the tough guy in the room. He respected the dog's discipline, but he also felt a desire to offer it a moment of kindness. The director, now standing a few feet away, called out, "Keanu? We need to check the lighting." Keanu held up a single finger, asking for a second of patience. It wasn't rude. It was just clear that he was busy with something important. He took another step closer. Now he was standing just a few feet away from the feared police dog. The handler didn't stop him. He could see the way Keanu was acting. It wasn't the chaotic energy of a fan or the nervous energy of a stranger. It was a calm, grounded presence that seemed to put the dog at ease. Keanu looked down at the dog's paws, then back up to its eyes. He gave a small, approving nod as if to say, "I see you, and you're doing good." The dog's tail gave a very slight wag, just a tiny twitch at the very tip. It was the only sign that the ice was breaking. For everyone watching, it was a surreal sight. The terrifying beast that everyone had been avoiding was suddenly sharing a quiet moment with one of the biggest movie stars in the world. But Keanu wasn't done just looking. He could sense that the dog was curious about him too. He realized that stopping to look wasn't enough. He wanted to bridge that gap completely. He ignored the busy set around him, the phones that were being pulled out to record, and the noise of the crew. In his mind, it was just him and the dog. He felt a connection that he knew he needed to act on. The usual rules about not distracting a working police dog didn't seem to apply, not because he was famous, but because the dog was inviting him in with its eyes. Slowly, Keanu began to lower his body. He didn't bend at the waist in a rush. He shifted his weight and began to drop down to one knee. This was the universal signal of surrender and friendship in the animal world. By getting down to the dog's level, he was telling the dog that he wasn't a dominant figure trying to control it, but a friend coming to say hello. As his knee touched the dusty ground, the entire crew held its breath, wondering what would happen next. As Keanu Reeves lowered his knee onto the dusty pavement, the air around the movie set seemed to stand completely still. It was a strange, almost magical moment where time felt like it had paused. Just seconds ago, this area had been a place of noise and chaos, with people shouting orders and equipment banging around. Now there was silence. The only sounds were the distant hum of traffic and the quiet breathing of the large police dog standing in front of him. Keanu didn't rush. He took his time, making sure his movements were slow and steady. He wasn't dropping down to pose for a picture or to show off for the cameras. He was doing it because, in that moment, the most important thing in the world to him was the animal in front of him. The handler stood frozen, his hand gripping the leather leash tight. His heart was beating a little faster than usual. This was a high-stress situation for a police officer. You spend hundreds of hours training a dog to be disciplined and focused, and you never know how they will react when a stranger suddenly invades their personal space. The handler knew that if his dog made a wrong move, if it lunged or snapped, it would be a disaster. But he also trusted his dog. He looked into the animal's eyes and saw that there was no aggression there, only curiosity. Still, he stayed alert, ready to pull the dog back if he had to. He watched Keanu closely, looking for any sign of fear, but he didn't find any. Keanu looked completely calm to the crowd watching from a distance. This scene looked like something out of a movie itself, but it was better because it was real. The contrast was striking. On one side, you had this dog that looked like a tank, a creature trained to chase down bad guys and protect officers at all costs. It was wearing a heavy vest that made it look even bigger and tougher. On the other side, you had one of the most famous actors in the world, kneeling in the dirt like a humble servant. It broke all the rules of how people usually behave around scary dogs. Usually people stand tall, shout commands, or run away. Keanu was doing the opposite. He was making himself small. As Keanu settled on one knee, he brought his face down to the same level as the dog's. This is a huge deal in the animal world. When a human stands over a dog and looks down, it can feel like a threat. It makes the dog feel cornered. But by kneeling, Keanu was telling the dog, "I am not a threat. I am your friend. We are equals." He didn't stare aggressively into the dog's eyes, which can be seen as a challenge. Instead, he looked at the dog with soft eyes, tilting his head slightly to the side. He even offered a small, gentle smile, the kind you give to an old friend you haven't seen in a while. The dog reacted in a way that surprised everyone. Instead of barking or backing away, it took a small step forward. Its nose twitched as it caught the scent of the man in front of it. Dogs experience the world mostly through smell. And this dog was getting a strong reading of Keanu. It probably smelled the dust from the set, the faint scent of leather from his jacket, and maybe even the smell of other dogs he might have owned. But more than that, dogs are incredibly good at reading energy. They can feel if a person is angry, nervous, or kind. The dog seemed to realize that the energy coming from this kneeling man was pure and gentle. It was a safe energy. Keanu slowly reached out with his right hand. He didn't reach for the dog's head or its face, which can be risky. He reached out with his palm open, offering the back of his hand for the dog to sniff first. This is the polite way to introduce yourself to a dog. It's like shaking hands before you start a conversation. The handler watched closely, ready to react, but he didn't need to worry. The dog stretched its neck forward and took a long, deep sniff of Keanu's hand. The crowd of crew members held their collective breath. A few people had their phones out, recording the interaction, but most were just watching with their mouths slightly open. They were witnessing a transformation that nobody expected. The dog that had been terrifying them just a few minutes ago was now pressing its wet nose into the hand of a movie star. After the sniff, the dog pulled its head back slightly and looked at Keanu. The tension in its ears relaxed, and they flopped down a little instead of standing straight up. The hard, intense stare softened. Keanu saw this change and decided it was safe to go further. He slowly moved his hand up and gently stroked the top of the dog's head, right between the ears. He used a soft touch, not a heavy pat. He spoke then, but his voice was so low that only the dog and the handler could hear it. He wasn't using a loud, high-pitched baby voice that some people use. He was using a deep, soothing, respectful tone. He whispered things like, "Who is this? You're such a good dog. Look at you." It was amazing to see the effect those words had on the animal. The dog, who was supposed to be a fierce warrior, leaned into Keanu's touch. It closed its eyes for a second, enjoying the feeling of the gentle hand scratching behind its ear. The dog's tail, which had been hanging stiffly, began to move. At first, it was just a small wag, a little twitch at the end. But as Keanu continued to pet him and speak to him, the tail started to wag harder. It swept back and forth, hitting the handler's leg lightly. The dog's mouth opened and its tongue lolled out to the side. It wasn't panting from stress anymore. It was panting happily. The handler felt the tension leave his own body. He loosened his grip on the leash. Seeing his partner, this serious canine officer who he worked with every day, melt under the touch of a stranger was heartwarming. It showed him that despite all the tough training and the serious police work, the dog was still a dog at heart. It needed love and affection just like any other creature. He looked at Keanu with a new level of respect. Many celebrities would have ignored the dog or just waved from a distance. But this man had taken the time to kneel in the dirt and make a real connection. The director and the producers were standing off to the side, watching the scene unfold. They knew they were supposed to be filming a movie, but nobody wanted to interrupt this. It was too beautiful. The lighting technician who had been scared to walk past the dog earlier was now wiping a tear from his eye. It changed the whole mood of the set. The fear that had been hanging over the crew like a dark cloud vanished completely. It was replaced by a warm, fuzzy feeling. Keanu wasn't in a hurry to get up. He spent a good few minutes there with the dog. He scratched the dog's neck, rubbed its chest, and even let the dog sniff his face. The dog was in heaven. It was nudging Keanu's hand with its nose, asking for more. It was almost funny to see the contrast. The dog looked so big and scary in its uniform, but it was acting like a puppy getting belly rubs. Keanu laughed quietly, a genuine sound of joy, when the dog lifted its paw and tried to put it on his knee. It was a clear sign of trust. The dog was effectively saying, "I like you. You can stay." This simple act of kneeling down had done something powerful. It had humanized a figure that was seen as just a tool of law enforcement. It reminded everyone watching that animals have feelings and personalities. The dog wasn't just a scary beast to be avoided. It was a living, breathing soul that responded to kindness. Keanu Reeves, through his actions, taught everyone a lesson without saying a single lecture. He showed that if you lower your defenses and treat others with respect, even the most feared individuals can become gentle friends. As the moment went on, the dog leaned its entire weight against Keanu's legs, seeking comfort. The actor didn't pull away. He let the dog lean on him, supporting the animal's weight. He looked into the dog's eyes with a look of pure love. It was a silent conversation between two souls. The handler looked around at the crew and saw smiles everywhere. The fear was gone. The monster was just a dog, and the movie star was just a kind man with a big heart. This was the turning point, the moment where the entire energy of the situation shifted from fear to love. The change in the dog was nothing short of a miracle. Only moments ago, this animal had been the picture of discipline and danger, a creature that cleared the sidewalk just by standing there. But now, under the touch of Keanu Reeves, the tough police dog seemed to be melting. It was as if the actor's hand had a magic switch that turned off the working mode and turned on the good boy mode. The dog leaned heavily into Keanu's legs, pushing its side against him with a force that nearly knocked the actor off balance. But Keanu didn't mind. Instead of pulling away or bracing himself, he just laughed, a soft, rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate right into the dog's chest. He steadied himself by placing a hand on the dog's shoulder. Accepting the weight and the love that came with it, this was a side of the dog the handler rarely saw. Usually when this dog was off duty, it was still high energy, running around or playing with intense focus. But this was different. This was pure, relaxed affection. The dog's eyes, which had been scanning the perimeter for threats, were now half-closed in bliss. Its long pink tongue lolled out to the side, and a happy, goofy expression took over its face. It looked ridiculous and wonderful all at the same time. The contrast between the scary tactical vest and the dog's silly, happy grin was striking. It reminded everyone watching that under the uniform, this was just a living being that wanted to be loved. Keanu, still kneeling on the hard ground, didn't stop at just petting the dog's head. He moved his hands down to the dog's chest, scratching firmly right in the spot that dogs love the most. The dog immediately reacted by lifting its head high and stretching its neck out, making a low, groaning noise of pure pleasure. It was a sound that made everyone smile. The actor seemed to know exactly where to scratch. He wasn't just touching the dog. He was communicating with it. He was telling the dog that it was safe, that it could relax, and that it was appreciated for more than just its ability to bite or chase. The handler stood there, looking at his partner with a mixture of shock and delight. He had spent years training this dog, working through rain, snow, and heat to build a team that could handle any situation. But he had never seen the dog connect with a stranger so quickly. It wasn't just that the dog was tolerating the attention. It was actively seeking it. The dog kept nudging Keanu's hand with its wet nose whenever the actor slowed down, as if to say, "Don't stop, more please." Seeing this tough, elite canine officer acting like a puppy, getting treats was a heartwarming sight that the handler knew he would never forget. While the handler watched, the crew members around them were also having a profound reaction. Just a little while ago, these same people were afraid to walk past the dog. They had been whispering about how scary it looked. Now, seeing the dog so vulnerable and sweet, the fear completely evaporated. It was replaced by a warm, collective feeling of tenderness. People who were rushing to get cables set up stopped in their tracks just to watch. Some of the crew members, big tough guys who lift heavy equipment all day, found themselves smiling like idiots. It was impossible not to. The scene was just too pure. One of the makeup artists, who had been terrified of the dog earlier, wiped a tear from her eye. It wasn't a sad cry. It was just an emotional release. Seeing Keanu Reeves, a man known for action and violence in his movies, showing such gentle tenderness to a scary dog broke down some kind of wall inside her. It made her realize that judgments are often wrong. We judge things by how they look on the outside, the dog's vest, its muscles, its breed, but on the inside, the dog just wanted kindness. And the person giving that kindness was the last person anyone might have expected to be on his knees in the dirt. Keanu shifted his position slightly, and the dog took it as an invitation. The big animal suddenly flopped down on the ground, rolling onto its side right next to Keanu's knee. It exposed its belly, which is the ultimate sign of trust for a dog. By doing this, the dog was saying, "I completely trust you. I am defenseless." It was a shocking display of submission and affection from a trained police dog. Keanu didn't hesitate. He reached down and rubbed the dog's belly, using both hands now. The dog's legs kicked in the air, and its tail wagged so hard it was kicking up dust from the ground. The laughter from the crew grew a little louder at this sight. Here was a dog that could take down a criminal, now kicking its legs in the air like a puppy playing in the park. The absurdity of the image brought a sense of joy to the set. The heavy mood that had been hanging over them because of the heat and the pressure was gone. In its place was a lightheartedness that made the work seem easier. It was amazing how one moment of kindness could change the vibe of an entire workplace. Keanu was in his own world. He wasn't thinking about the movie script, or the millions of dollars the movie would make, or the fans waiting outside. He was just thinking about the dog. He spoke to it softly in that gentle, low voice he had. He whispered, "You're such a good boy." "Yes, you are." "Who's a good boy?" It was the same simple stuff that dog owners say to their pets every day, but hearing it come from a global superstar made it special. It humanized him. It showed that, despite all the fame, he understood the simple, universal language of love for an animal. The dog was soaking it all up. It rolled its head back to look up at Keanu, its eyes bright and full of adoration. You could almost see the dog thinking, "Where have you been all my life?" The connection between them was electric. It wasn't just an actor petting a prop. It was a real, emotional bond forming in real time. The handler eventually decided that it was okay to loosen the leash completely, giving the dog full freedom to enjoy the moment. He knew that the dog wouldn't run off. Why would it? It was getting the best pets of its life. The transformation of the dog was a mirror for the people watching. They started to see the animal not as a tool of law enforcement, but as an individual with a personality. They saw the way the dog's ears flopped when Keanu scratched the right spot. They saw the way the dog's fur was soft, not bristly with aggression. The fear that had dictated their behavior earlier was replaced by curiosity and affection. A few brave crew members even stepped a little closer, hoping to get a better look or maybe even to pet the dog once Keanu was done. Keanu sensed this shift too. He knew that his interaction was doing more than just making the dog happy. He looked up briefly and saw the smiles on people's faces. He saw the fear gone. He gave a small, humble nod to the handler, acknowledging the bond he was allowed to share with the dog. He didn't hog the dog. He was just sharing a moment. He kept rubbing the dog's belly, but he adjusted his angle so the dog was still visible to everyone, letting them see the gentle creature that was hiding behind the scary reputation. As the minutes passed, the dog's breathing slowed down to a steady, relaxed rhythm. It was calm. Completely calm. The chaotic noise of the set, the hammers, the shouting, the engines didn't bother it anymore. It felt safe there on the ground next to Keanu. It felt protected. It was a beautiful paradox. The human was protecting the police dog from the stress of the world, just by being kind. The dog let out a long, contented sigh and closed its eyes, resting its heavy head on Keanu's boot. It was the ultimate sign of surrender to the moment. The silence from the crowd, mixed with the soft sounds of the dog enjoying the attention, was more powerful than any explosion or car chase they were filming that day. It was a quiet moment of humanity and connection. The feared beast was gone. In its place was a beloved friend. And the man responsible for it was simply a guy who loved dogs enough to get on his knees and show it. The scene was etched into the memories of everyone who was there, a reminder that kindness is the strongest force in the world, capable of turning fear into love in just a few seconds. As Keanu finally started to slow down his petting, the dog opened its eyes, looking up at him with a gaze that said, "Thank you." It was a moment that transcended words, a silent exchange of gratitude between two different species. All good things must eventually come to an end, even a moment as perfect as this one. The silence on the set was broken by the loud crackle of the director's voice coming through the speakers. "All right, everyone, places please. We are rolling in 5 minutes." The announcement acted like a splash of cold water, bringing everyone back to reality. The movie magic had to happen, and the star of the show was needed on the mark. Keanu Reeves slowly pulled his hands away from the dog's fur. It was a gentle movement, not a sudden stop. He didn't want to break the connection too harshly. As soon as the petting stopped, the dog seemed to realize that the special time was over. It opened its eyes and lifted its head from Keanu's boot. It looked up at him with a gaze that was almost pleading, as if to ask, "Why are you stopping?" "Don't go." But Keanu just smiled, that warm, familiar smile of his. He gave the dog one last, firm pat on the shoulder and whispered something final that nobody else could hear. Maybe he promised to come back? Or maybe he just said goodbye? Then, with a little effort, he began to stand up. He had been kneeling on the hard pavement for quite a while. So he stood up slowly, brushing the dust off his jeans. As he rose to his full height, the change in perspective was immediate. The puppy that had been rolling on the ground moments ago seemed to understand that work mode was returning. The dog scrambled to its feet, shook its body vigorously from head to tail to get rid of the dust, and straightened its posture. The tail wagging slowed down, and the serious expression came back over its face. But it wasn't the same scary look as before. This time, the dog looked proud, not intimidating. Keanu didn't just walk away. He turned to the handler and extended his hand. The handler took it, and they shared a firm handshake. It wasn't a fan shaking hands with a celebrity. It was two men sharing a moment of mutual respect. Keanu looked the officer in the eye and nodded. He told him what a beautiful, incredible dog he had. He praised the animal's training and its spirit. The handler beamed with pride. It is rare for a police officer to hear someone appreciate the dog's soul rather than just its biting power. The handler thanked him, genuinely moved by the interaction. He told Keanu that in all his years working with this dog, he had never seen it take to someone so fast. Then Keanu did something else that showed his class. He didn't look for the cameras. He didn't wait to see if people were watching or clapping. He simply turned around and walked toward the film set, grabbing his water bottle on the way. He walked with that same humble, relaxed stride he had when he arrived. He didn't act like he had just done something heroic. To him, he had just petted a dog. But to everyone else watching, he had done something much more profound. The crowd that had gathered to watch was now standing in a thick silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Earlier, the silence was filled with fear. Now it was filled with emotion. People looked at each other with wide eyes. One by one, the crew members started reaching for tissues or wiping their eyes with their sleeves. It sounds strange to say that grown men and women were crying over a dog getting petted, but it wasn't really about that. It was about what the moment represented. The tears came because the scene had stripped away all the barriers we usually put up. In this world, we are often taught to judge things by how dangerous they look, or how famous someone is, or what their job title is. We are taught to fear the things we don't understand, like the police dog. We are taught to put celebrities on a pedestal, far away from us. But in those few minutes, Keanu Reeves had smashed all those ideas. He showed that true strength isn't about being scary or untouchable. True strength is having the confidence to be kind. It is having the courage to lower yourself to the ground to connect with another living being. Seeing the monster dog turn into a gentle friend right before their eyes broke down the walls of fear that the crew had built up. It was a release. For weeks, maybe months, they had been avoiding this animal, treating it like a dangerous machine. Now they realized it had feelings and a heart all along. The guilt they felt for fearing the dog, mixed with the joy of seeing it loved so tenderly, brought tears to their eyes. It was a cathartic moment. A young woman who worked in the costume department was standing with her hands over her mouth, sobbing quietly. She later told a friend that seeing the dog roll over for Keanu was the most beautiful thing she had seen in years. It made her think about how we treat people too. She thought about how often we judge people by their uniforms, their clothes, their job, their attitude, without taking the time to kneel down and see who they really are inside. Keanu had reminded everyone that there is a soft heart inside even the toughest exterior, even the director. Usually a gruff man focused only on the shots, had to pause and take a deep breath. He watched Keanu walk away and then looked at the dog. The dog was sitting calmly now, looking at Keanu's retreating back with a look of loyalty. The director shook his head in amazement. He knew he had just witnessed something that no camera could fully capture. You can write a scene like this in a movie, but you can't fake the genuine energy that was in the air right then. It felt like a lesson in humanity. As Keanu stepped onto the marked spot on the floor and started speaking to his co-star, the atmosphere on the entire set had shifted. The heaviness was gone. The fear was gone. The crew moved with a new lightness in their steps. When they looked over at the police K-9 unit now, they didn't see a beast to be afraid of. They saw a friend. A few people even walked past the dog and gave it a friendly smile or a soft, "good boy," as they passed by. The dog, sensing the change in the room, didn't growl. It just watched them calmly, its tail giving a small, friendly wag. The rest of the day went smoother than anyone expected. The sun didn't feel as hot, the work didn't feel as hard. Everyone had a shared memory that bonded them together. They didn't just talk about the movie scenes. They talked about Keanu and the dog. It became a legend on that set. It was the story they would tell their families when they got home that night. "You won't believe what happened today," they would say. "The feared police dog, the one we were all scared of? Keanu Reeves knelt down and turned it into a puppy. It was the sweetest thing I've ever seen." In the end, the story isn't just about a famous actor or a police dog. It is about the power of empathy. It is a reminder that every creature we meet, human or animal, is fighting a battle we know nothing about. The dog was working hard, being the tough guy, because that was its job. But it needed kindness just as much as anyone else. Keanu saw that need and met it without hesitation. When the day finally wrapped and the sun went down, the K-9 unit packed up to leave. As the handler walked the dog to the car, the dog stopped one last time and looked toward the spot where Keanu had been kneeling. It gave a small sniff of the ground, as if trying to hold on to the scent of the kind man who had taken the time to see him. The handler smiled, patted the dog's head, and opened the car door. They drove off into the night, no longer just feared figures of authority, but beloved characters in a beautiful, true story that everyone on that set would hold in their hearts forever. Keanu Reeves didn't just act that day. He taught a lesson that touched the soul, leaving not just the dog, but the entire human crew changed for the better.